So in 19, consider the following code. Public class temp test. Public static void main. System.out.println. Enter temperature scale. String scale equals io.readString, so it's reading the user input. System.out.println. Enter the number of degrees. Double degrees equals io.readDouble. So then it reads that again. And then you have the code to construct it from these, well, from scale and degrees. So what is the correct replacement for code to construct? Temperature T equals new temperature, degrees, scale. If not T dot is valid temp, degrees, scale. Error message in exit program. So that looks pretty fine. 19. So, then 2, if is valid temp, degrees, scale, temperature T equals new temperature, degrees, scale, else, error message. So, this is fine because you're calling the isValidTemp method on degrees and scale. And then it will just return true if it's okay and false if it's not. So you just end up in the right places. And then if temperature.isValidTemp degrees scale, it's not a static method, so you don't call it on temperature. So 3 is incorrect. Or wait, is it a static? Let me check. So which method was it? IsValidTemp. So we go up here and we check isValidTemp. Gosh, it's hard to find. Aha. So yeah, it is static. So it actually is called on temperature rather than a variable as here, or just implied here. So 3 is the correct answer because it's called on the class name rather than an actual instantiation. So it's C. For 20, consider the following code. Public class temp test, public static void main, system.out.println, enter temperature scale. Yeah, this seems pretty familiar. Yeah, looks like a repeat. So if we consider the program, public class count stuff, public static void do something, int count equals 0, and then there's code to do something, no screen output, and then count plus plus. So here's our main that we start with, int count equals 0, system.out.println, how many iterations? So it's asking you, and then reads it in. For int 1 equals 1, I is less than or equal to n, and then I plus plus. So it's just iterating over do something n times. And so, let's see. Count is not produced within the main. It's produced inside do something. So that's a different scope, and main just doesn't have access to it. So if the input value for n is 3, but we really don't even have to... wait. Oh, count is here. Okay. So there are different variables. It's just 2 different counts. So you do something, but since there are 2 different counts, this count changes, but this count never does, so it's always 0. So it's A. So for 22, this question refers to the following class: public class int object, public int myint, public int object, default constructor, myint equals 0, public int object int n, myint equals n, and public void increment myInt++. So here's a client program that uses this class, public class int object test, public static int object some method int object obj, int object ans equals obj, ans equals, or ans dot increment, and then return ans. So here's our main that we start with when we're going through the code. Int object x equals new int object. That's kind of weird. Okay. And then int object y equals new int object 7. Int object a equals y, x equals some method y, and a equals some method x. So constructing these, this is 2, this is 7, and then a equals y. So these are both the same reference. So x equals some method on y, and so it's incremented because of the reference. So the reference goes into ans, and then the reference gets incremented, and then it just returns ans. So y was what it was called on. So y is now 8, which means a is also 8. And then x is 8 as well. So then it calls some method on x, and they're all the same reference now, so they all just add 1, and then a equals 9. So then it's just a, because they're all the same. All the same reference, and they end up being the same thing. So a. Okay, for 23, consider the following program. Public class tester, public void some method, int a, int b, int temp equals a equals b equals temp. So here's our main. Int x equals 6, y equals 8, tester equals new tester, tester.sum method xy. So have our integers 6 and 8, and then we call some method on x and y. So this is trying to just swap them, but the thing is they're not references. So anything you do in here won't do anything in here. So it ends up just before the end of execution of this program, what are the values of x, y, and temp respectively. So this is a little bit misleading. So temp is actually out of scope at the end of the execution of the program. But yeah, so they just don't get swapped. X is 6, 8, or x is 6, y is 8, and question mark because temp is just in a separate scope. So 6, 8, question mark, C is the correct answer.